My name is James Williams Jr., and welcome to Kung Fu Havoc number 2, and this is my comic book review, part 1. So I'm going to go through a couple of comic book characters that you may know and may not know, and all of these will most likely be Marvel, and a few of these may be DC. I'm going to try not to deviate between the two, so I think part 1 should mostly be about Marvel, and part 2 should probably be about DC, because it's going to be shorter. And Marvel's going to be longer because I know more about Marvel characters. So let me give you a rundown of characters that are no longer owned or property of Marvel. Alright, so for those who don't know, those who weren't born in the 70s or the early 80s, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Marvel Comics. Alright? There are a couple of other ones that were Marvel Comics that I can't remember, but they're no longer Marvel Comics. They're like independent comics now. But Transformers and G.I. Joe. Marvel and Hasbro had a hell of a deal. And Transformers and G.I. Joe got their own comics and got their own cartoons. And G.I. Joe was an old school toy first, and then it became a comic, and then it became a cartoon. Now, my files could be completely wrong on that, because I know that G.I. Joe, originally the toy was the size of a Ken doll, and it came out when Barbie and Ken came out, and then Transformers came out in the 80s, but their cartoon and their comic books came out, at about roughly the same time, and G.I. Joe came out in the comic book as soon, not too long, with Transformers in them as well. There's a lot of crossover comics if you can find them. Only the Marvel ones that I know of for sure did crossovers with Transformers and G.I. Joe. Alright? And yes, Witwicky is the actual name of Sam. And I don't know where the hell it became Spike, but I think they're supposed to be the same guy because the Bumblebee and all that stuff. So depending on what mythology you want to go by, whether it's the comic that was Marvel or the comic that it is now that you know G.I. Joe and Transformers were both Marvel comics before they are who they belong to now. I don't know what happened there, because I know that one day Marvel had G.I. Joe and then it wasn't G.I. Joe. And it was like completely revamped, so I didn't read the other ones. I was stuck with the Marvel ones because those were the ones that I read. Those are the ones that inspired me to keep learning how to read. Those are the ones that made me fall in love with Snake Eyes, Falcon, and Jinx. And the Hardmaster, who was black and blind. And Cobra Commander's son. Alright? Yeah, Cobra Commander had a son. Yeah, you didn't know that, did you? Okay, anyway. So we're going to get off of them, because I can't remember the other comics that was Marvel that are no longer Marvel. I know that RoboCop's in there somewhere. And then Dark Horse had like some deal with both Marvel and DC to put them against like movie characters and shit. So a lot of things that Marvel got rid of, they're probably kicking themselves in the ass now, saying, "Damn, we probably should have kept that." But now it's gone. So there you go. But anyway, because Hasbro had the toy line set up for G.I. Joe and Transformers. Just a side note on that. Okay, so now we're gonna go into my comic book review. Before you go see any of these movies and all this other stuff, I'm going to drop some facts on you that you should know. And this relevates back from 1993 all the way back down to 1977, 78. Somewhere in there when I was like 7, 8 years old. Alright. So, here's my thing. First comic book I ever read was a DC comic. We're not going to talk about that in this video. Alright. So, we're going to go from what led me to the X-Men. So I was a big Spider-Man fan. Spider-Man used to come on NBC every Saturday, and it was Spider-Man, His Amazing Friends. Fact. Firestar was never an X-Man. She was Hellion, but she was never an X-Man. But then when the cartoon came out, they made her an X-Man because Iceman was an X-Man, and supposedly somewhere in the comic book they may have dated. I don't know if that's a factual fact or not because I never saw it. I can never find the comic book, and then in one dimension, she is an X-Man. So if you want to, if you want to go by dimensions and timelines and shit like that, then yes, Firestar was an X-Man, but ends up being a New Warrior by the end of her illustrious career. She's a New Warrior who dated Marvel Boy, who would later become Justice, who would later become Major Victory, a.k.a. Vance Astro, my boy. Anyway, so going backwards, I prefer to read the comic books that specifically deal with mutants. because I've always felt like I'm a mutant. I didn't feel like Spider-Man and I need to be bit by a radioactive spider. But Spider-Man is what led me to the X-Men because I used to read Spider-Man and my boy David. Hey David. David Hector Hutchinson. Yeah, I gave your whole fucking name out there, brother. Especially since you haven't talked to me since high school. Anyway, David got me into the New Mutants. The New Mutants were the new team of X-Men. The New Mutants led me to the X-Men. Once I started reading the X-Men, I went back and got all back issues and X-Men classics and everything, and I never stopped. My favorite two X-Men have always been Colossus and Wolverine, and that's just the males. The favorite female X-Men, there's a shit list of them. Alright? And I'm talking about just the heroes. I haven't even gotten to my favorite female villains. So I'm going to exclusively go from here out X-Men. Alright? So this comic review number 1 is going to be specifically about X-Men and things that you don't know, and things that you should know, and things that you probably don't want to know before you go see these X-Men movies. Alright, because somebody's going to see this eventually. I'll probably be dead by all the time that anybody notices me, but here we go. Alright, so X-Men. Let's start with the X-Men. There are 5 teams of X-Men. Hold it. I know what you're thinking. Now this is where I break it down for you. When I say 5 teams, that's actually extending to 5 comic books. First you have the Uncanny X-Men, and then you have the X-Men. Uncanny X-Men was the first and original title. And somewhere in the 90s, they gave the X-Men a new book called The X-Men, which also regulated with the comic book. So there's 2 of those books, because one is the X-Men, which doesn't have anything to do with the cartoon, and it has something to do with the comic book. And then you have the limited series that is as seen on TV. Alright, that's the long and short of that. So let's go back. You have the Uncanny X-Men. You had the X-Men Classics. And then you had the X-Men. So you're thinking, that's only 3, James. Well, we have a little bit of a misconstruction there. The X-Men and the Uncanny X-Men also had a spin-off known as X-Factor. That's number 4. And number 5 was the New Mutants. Now, here's where things get interesting, because I said there were 5 comic books. I'm sorry, I was sadly mistaken. There was at least 7. You didn't see that coming? X-Terminator was a mini-series, because they were spawned off from the New Mutants, which I believe Amadeus Cho was a member of that, and he was a mutant who could build stuff just like Forge. And his 2 friends were Leech and his brother, who I can't remember, because he had a name that I just couldn't pronounce at the time. And the members of the X-Terminator, I will give them to you right now, besides Leech and his brother, because I can't remember his brother, Amadeus Cho. I could be wrong there, but he was like one of the strong Asian characters in the X-Terminators. He was the only Asian character in the X-Terminators. Tabitha Smith, a.k.a. Boom Boom, who would soon become Meltdown after becoming Boomer, and would be transferred from the X-Terminators to the New Mutants, because the X-Terminators had to team up with the New Mutants, and then the X-Terminators comic was canceled, and then the X-Terminators would just stay in the New Mutants, but Rusty and Skids would join the MLF, and basically not know that they were bad guys, and then Boomer and Richter would go renegade and just be like, I'm not joining anything that has anything to do with X-Men on any way, shape, or form, and still wound up being a member of the X-Men. And then, as time would go on, the X-Men would catch another team known as Generation X, which Jubilee would be one of the original leaders once it comes to pass, after you get past M and the bald black guy named Evan and some other people. Okay, and Mudo, whatever. Not the floating head that deals with Iron Man. That's MODOK. But we're staying specifically with X-Men teams. Alright? Now, each comic book, most of the team members of each comic, there were at least 5 people on the team. And I'm going to get to Excalibur for those who are X-Men fans. Excalibur was the original spin-off before X-Factor. Alright? A lot of people don't know that. And if I'm wrong, then you can correct that. But as far as I know, before X-Factor was a factor, you just didn't know what happened to the first 5 X-Men. But you knew what happened to the fucking other 7. Alright? So, let me jump back. Boom! Look at that. I jumped back. Okay, see, what happened was, You have Uncanny X-Men. And on that team, originally, you had Cyclops, Jean Grey or Marvel Girl, Angel, Warren Worthington III, Beast, Henry McCoy or Hank, and Bobby Drake. Well, eventually they graduated and they left the comic, and behind they left Psylocke, Elizabeth Braddock, European, Havoc, Alex Summers, Cyclops' younger brother, who should not have been in X-Men First Class, by the way. And then they had Polaris, and Banshee, Thunderbird, Wolverine, Storm, and Colossus. Oh, I left off the Japanese guy, Sunfire. So that's like 14 guys right there, minus those other 5 guys. And they were the new. Oh yeah, I left off Nightcrawler, and I left off Kitty Pryde. See where I'm going? So you have like 13 guys in that Uncanny X-Men right there. So the book was getting really big. So X Factor would come a few years later with the original 5 X-Men living in Manhattan instead of living in Salem. Alright? So you have X Factor in Manhattan, you have the X-Men in Salem, and you have the New Mutants in Salem, which consist of Karma, Magma, Magic, Mirage, Doug, I forgot what the heck his code name was, Warlock, and Sunspot, which extended with Lila Cheney, who was a rock star who moonlighted as a New Mutant every now and again, and she was in love with Sam Guthrie and all kinds of other stuff. But Sam, Cannonball, and Mirage, Danielle Moonstar, were co-leaders. And so all in all, it was about like 7 of them too. So eventually you start off as a New Mutant and you graduate into the X-Men. However, when the second class of New Mutants came, they were X-Men. They were never in the New Mutants. They were just X-Men. Know what I'm saying? So confusing, yes. Very confusing, and I'm sorry. But each X-Men team has 7 or more. So in Death in Dallas, the X-Men that died, Storm, Colossus, Psylocke, Dazzler, Wolverine, and Havoc. And then there's the other X-Man who wasn't an X-Man because she didn't really have powers, but she lost her powers. She was the clone of Jean Grey. Her name was Madeline Pryor, and she would be the one who would bear Scott Summers a son, who would name be Nathaniel Charles Xavier Christopher Summers. You guys will find out that that's going to be Cable. Alright? Who also had the legacy virus thanks to Apocalypse. But if it wasn't for Apocalypse, he wouldn't exist in the first place because he put the knowledge into Sinister. Sinister made the clone of Madeline, who was actually the clone of Jean Grey, who was supposedly part of the Phoenix, who was never part of the Phoenix. And boom, outborn Cable. Alright, so Cable's like the ultimate mutant, supposedly. However, we forgot something. Professor Xavier has some children of his own, which he neglected to tell his X-Men, which would come back to bite him in the ass. Only one child is actually known, though, and the other children, they haven't ever really brought out of the woodwork. But the one child that they know about was called Legion, and Legion had 5 personalities and 2 powers of personality. So he was like what you would call a god, basically, amongst the mutant kind. If anybody would ever had to fight Apocalypse and win, it would probably be him. Because he didn't have a limit to his powers. And he had a personality for every power. So he was fucked up. And that's me putting it nicely. He was completely fucked up. So if you are an X-Men fan, you know about Legion. You also know that he's tried to kill his father on multiple occasions for child neglect. Basically, that's all I got. I don't really know why he tried to kill him. I have to go back and read all these books again. But in Executioner Song, he tried to kill him. Cable put him down. And then everybody thought that Cable was trying to kill Xavier, so everybody was after him. But it was actually his clone, Stripe, that was trying to kill Xavier. So everybody was trying to kill Xavier. And somewhere along the line, in another timeline, comes Bishop and them, who are trying to come back and kill Gambit because they think that Gambit's trying to kill Xavier. So whatever the hell Xavier's life is worth, it changes a lot of the worlds and the universes if he dies. So you get where we're going with that? Okay. So you have Generation X, Uncanny X-Men, X-Men Classic, X-Men, X Factor, Excalibur, X Force, which is what the New Mutants would become. And then they went to that writers thing where they went to Exiles, X something else, and X something else until they got all the royalty shit ironed out. And then it went back to X Men, X Men this, X Men that. And eventually, I left off things like Adam X and Condor or whatever the hell his name is because those are all Summers kids. Except for like Adam X is actually the mother. He was like the third kid, but he was the son of the kin, a product of rape. So yeah, that kind of thing. And he still managed to wind up meeting up with the grandfather's Corsair's dad in Alaska when he crashed a plane and he saved his life or some shit. It's a long story. You have to go find it. Anyway, his name's Adam X, and he's a Summers. Technically, he's not a Summers because Corsair's not his daddy, but he's a child of his wife. All right, because everybody thought that the wife was dead, but apparently the kin kept her because he was fascinated with her, and he made a child with her. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't by choice; it was by force. But anyway, moving on back down to Earth and get away from the Shi'ar Empire for a minute. I'm not going to return to the Shi'ar Empire. I'm just going to basically stay with X-Men for the whole damn report. So you have all these guys that are coming out of the woodwork, and then the X-Men are killing the X-Men, because Forge killed the X-Men with a spell, and then Roma put them back, and I guess she brought them back as a favor to Captain Britain, whose sister was Psylocke, who was European, who would come back to this siege Parallax, and wind up becoming an Asian woman. A very hot Asian woman. Okay? And the Asian dude that looked like Wolverine, who Wolverine's cut off this part of his nose at least twice, would find her, and then they would leave Japan and come back home and find Jubilee, and then they would leave Australia to never return after he got crucified by the Reavers. Not to be mistaken by the Marauders. The Reavers are led by Lady Deathstrike, who was once Wolverine's wife, Yuriko. Yeah, this is a hell of a soap opera, right? Of course it is, because here's the facts. If you're not an X-Men fan, you don't know who the fuck Yuriko is. Well, in the movie, X-Men either United or Last Stand. I'm not sure which title it was, but I know Kelly Hu was in there. I love Kelly Hu. So, she played Yuriko. Yeah, she's the one that was dicing Wolverine's ass with the long fingernails. Yeah, well, in the comic book, those weren't the only things that could grow, because her whole arms could stretch out and everything. And she had like 5 or 6 guys that were sidekicks, the Reavers. And one of them had a tank body. It's like a centaur, but he had a tank body. And he had like guns on his arms, and he carried guns, and they could like pop up on his shoulders and shit. And then the other guys had other stuff, and I don't really remember them because they didn't really stand out. All right, you remember the characters that stand out. All right, let's go to Sinister's Nasty Boys. They were introduced in the comic first, and then they were on the TV show when they kidnapped Jean and Cyclops at the wedding. Well, the Nasty Boys, I only remember one of them. His name was Ruckus. Why do I remember him? Because he had the same fucking powers as Banshee. All right. Sometimes other mutants have the same powers. It's just a fact of life. Not everybody's not going to be a pyrokinetic or an ice person, but some people are going to have other X-Men powers. Everybody has a counterpart, so, there you go. Ruckus has never fought Banshee. I'm pretty sure that he probably would win, because his decibels were higher, and Banshee stopped using his powers and returned to being a cop again in Ireland, Scotland, or wherever the fuck he's from, overseas in the UK. We'll put it that way so I can be politically correct. And then him and Mary McTarget got back together, and I don't know what the hell was going on with her, him and Xavier and stuff. And as far as we know, she didn't have a child with Xavier. She had a child with someone else. His name was Proteus, and Proteus went ballistic, and he fucked up the X-Men because his powers was just like he could do whatever the fuck he wants, just kind of like Mirage and Magic. Because Mirage, she could pull your nightmares out of your dream and make them alive, and it would fuck you up. And Magic was just as bad because she owned the Soul Sword, and she spent like 14 years in hell, but she was only like a 4-year-old child. When she came back, she was 14. So, my math's off. It was kind of crazy. And she's also the sister of McCall and Peter. Colossus is a middle child. He has a younger sister, which was Magic, and he has an older brother. The older brother's powers, I'm not going to say they were lame, but they were just like Gedron's powers. His arms turned to organic steel, like Colossus, but it's his arms. But Colossus' whole body turned to organic steel. And Magic could only turn to organic steel when she was holding the Soul Sword. Then she fused the Soul Sword with Excalibur, and gave the power to control it to Kitty Pryde. Right? You see the dynamic there? Now, why does Kitty Pryde have the Soul Sword? Because Magic Ass is dead. Now, let's flip the script. During the Secret Wars, uh, Rachel Summers came from one dimension or another and fought the Beyonder. She was the Phoenix. She was the child of the Phoenix, but she was also Scott Summers' daughter with Jean Grey, not Scott Summers' son with Madeline Pryor. So, that kind of thing. So, knowing that, you're getting up to speed. They fought whoever they fought in the Secret Wars, and she went back home. Before she went home, she wasn't a slave, but when she went back home, she became a slave and escaped and came back. Here spawned the Secret Wars #2, and then they fought that guy again, and they won. And then she didn't go back home because while all that was going on, the X-Men were getting slaughtered in Dallas. But while all this was going on, the X-Men and Freedom Force had to fight together against Cheyenne Shaman, who was an enemy of Forge, who attacked Forge in his own building. To save everyone, Forge cast a spell that required 7 souls or 8 souls to be destroyed, and all the souls had to be pure and innocent. So, therefore, Colossus, Dazzler, Rogue, Storm, Havoc, and Madeline Pryor were all sacrificed and died. That's how the X-Men became legends, and that's why in a lot of the comics after that, you would have people who would get rescued by the X-Men spray the words X-Men live, because everybody's seen the X-Men literally die on TV. No. And at this time, what Mystique didn't know, that was Spiral the whole time working for Mojo, who was part of Longshot shit. That's the guy I'm missing. Longshot also died in Dallas with them. Thanks. That just came out of nowhere, so thank you, Spiral. But Spiral was spying for Mojo and filming everything that was going on, even the death in Dallas, all that crap. And yes, the Blob was a member of Freedom Force. He was not an X-Man like in X-Men Evolution cartoon. No. And Avalanche wasn't one either. And Toad was not a member of Freedom Force until later on. Before that, he was one of Magneto's cronies. No. But, it kind of all evolved around, because then Magneto started his group, and they went on Asteroid M, and then the MLF had one section where they were there, and then there was that whole Genosha shit, and then there was fractions of mutants everywhere, and then they had like the Watchdogs, the Warhounds, whatever the fuck they were. Not the Warhounds in the future, but whoever they were going after enhanced individuals or mutants and killing them. Yeah, I can't remember what the hell. I think it was called the Watchdogs. I'm not gonna swear to it though. You have to Google it. So I'm about to end this so that I can do a DC report. But for the most part, X-Men has had at least 7 comics, and each comic has had at least 5 to 7 mutants per team. All right. I think Generation X and Uncanny X-Men are the one that had the most, and then X-Force would probably come in a smooth second, because I know for a fact that X-Force members would jump from team to team. So every now and again, Cannonball would be an X-Man, and then he would be X-Force. And then sometimes Danielle Moonstar would be an X-Force member, and then sometimes she would be a fucking Valkyrie. Because when she went to Asgard and whatever the hell she did, she stabbed Odin. So to serve penance, she became a Valkyrie to make up for trying to kill Odin. So, it's for me, it's always been about the X-Men. It'll always be about the X-Men, no matter what Marvel book I read. And the only reason why I liked Guardians of the Galaxy is because of Astro Boy, Vance Astro, a.k.a. Justice, a.k.a. Marvel Boy, a.k.a. Major Victory, because he was like one of the last mutants alive, and plus he was fighting against Wolverine's niece, who was trying to get Wolverine's adamantium bone fused into her body. And after that, when they started fucking up with the comic, I stopped reading it. But it was connected to the X-Men because of Wolverine's niece, or somehow she was a descendant of Wolverine, but she was also a descendant of what the fuck is her damn name? I just said it. Yuriko. So either Yuriko had a secret daughter, or she was relatively the daughter of Wolverine, just from a different dimension or whatever, which goes to X-23. Was like the last thing I started reading before I stopped reading comics, was like X-23, which is a clone of Wolverine, only female. And she has the 2 claws, and I think she has one on her foot. like well two, one in both feet, but I forgot how it comes out, but I know she has two on her hands, or is it one up here and one up here? I forgot. But anyway, X-23, she was a badass, you know. So she and Wolverine were the only two who actually could relate to each other when he finally got to talking to her and shit. And then she kind of decided that she wanted to not have nothing to do with superhero life, and she tried to live in college, and she forgot that the people from Canada were hunting her ass down. The Weapon X program. Need I go on? Henceforth, X-23. She was the 23rd clone of Wolverine. All right, did actually progress and stuff. And I think she might have fought another clone, but I'm not going to swear to it because it's been a long time since I picked up an X-23 book. And then I don't even know if she's still in the comics now. So, as far as you know, any mutant superhero has come through the doors of the X-Men mansion. Most of them. Some bad guys, some good guys. Richter became an X Factor member because Wolfsbane, when they lined up the new X Factor team, when they got rid of the original five who went back to being X-Men under Scott's leadership and Storm's leadership, where they had a gold team and a blue team or some shit like that. It was really kind of fucked up in the 90s, man. But it was good. The story was going the way I liked it. And then everything went to hell in a handbasket. But other than that, when they lined up the new team of X Factor, you had multiple men, Jamie Murdochs, or Murdochs, or Maddox, or whatever the hell his name is. You had Wolfsbane, Renee St. Clair. You had Richter. I have never known what the fuck his name was outside of Richter. You had Havoc, who was the leader of the team. And you had Polaris, Lauren Dane, who was Magneto's illegitimate third child. Alright? Now, apparently, she is also the full-blooded sibling of both Walter and Wanda, not Walter, Pietro, excuse me. I've got my shit mixed up with Alpha Flight, which also was connected to the X-Men through Wolverine. Well, anyway, Pietro and Wanda Maximoff. I don't know how they have Maximoff as their last name, but Eric's last name is Letcher, and Polaris' last name is Lauren Dane. Well, apparently she has a different mother, but she is the sibling of their she's Magneto's kid. Now, the thing is, if you go by the movie, she's there with Quicksilver in the movie, because she's like, go play with your sisters, and you don't get to see Scarlet Witch, but you do get to see Quicksilver, and he's holding Polaris. She's the little girl. All right, so she was the youngest one. All right, because he's a twin. All right, so we got that covered. Good. So now we're gonna go to the last things I want to touch on. The reason why I would prefer to be a mutant than someone who's not. Up until Comrade Hodge, as far as the world knew and the universe knew, that mutant powers could not be taken from you because it's in your DNA. They could be frozen and they could be dormant, but they could not be taken completely from you until Comrade Hodge and Fall of the Mutants. In each comic book, a mutant died. So, except for like in the X-Men where all 7 died, and that was like the death in Dallas. But Fall of the Mutants was leading up to Comrade Hodge, and he came in with whatever, it was Extinction Agenda or some shit like that. And in the Extinction Agenda, he was some kind of cyborg thing who bonded with the Phalanx, which is like where Warlock came from, and he figured out how to take everybody's powers from them. But what he forgot to do is figure out a way to make sure that it was permanent, and somehow or another he didn't. And so Storm, being reborn in the body of a young girl when she came through the Siege Perilous, he captured her first, and she would become like the Oracle, or the sponge that would hold everybody's powers, because it had to go somewhere. So he put it in her, and she was kidnapped by Nanny, and Nanny and her was on the run, and then he started like getting everybody, and then she ran into Gambit, etc., etc., and then they went to Genosha, where they found Havoc, because he had been in Genosha for like 9 or 10 months as a Genoshan soldier who had no memory of who the fuck he was, but knew he was a mutant. And so, in the end, they all powered each other up, and they blew Comrade Hodge to smithereens. So I believe it was Extinction Agenda. Do not get that confused with Executioner Song, because Executioner Song is where Legion was trying to kill his dad, and Cable and Strafe were also trying to stop one or the other from killing Xavier. All right. So if you get those sagas, you know, you'll catch up with me and know what I'm talking about, and you like the way the story was going too. And then that big clusterfuck thing with Scarlet Witch because she miscarried a child that she had with Vision. Yet the fact that the writers obviously didn't read far enough back in the archives that she already had twins by Vision who were both boys. So I guess the child that was miscarried must have been a girl. I don't know what the hell happened because I stopped reading comic books after the fucking flip flop. Because Onslaught was fucking up people, and Onslaught was the shit. Onslaught would be a little parasite that was part Magneto and part Xavier, and I forgot how they finished them off, but you get the gist. I'm James Williams Jr. This is comic book review number 1, X-Men. Thank you, and good night.